Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. We are so pumped to be here today because our guest is full of personality. She likes to swear a little bit, but she's brilliant and she helps people, I think, just like be a human when it comes to having difficult conversations, setting boundaries, standing up for yourself, but also in such a loving way that really cultivates warmth in relationships. She has a podcast called the Bold Face Truth Podcast that some of the topics we're going to get into today, she covers in detail. So if you feel like, oh, I want more from Amy on that, go to her podcast. She's also a life coach, a hypnotherapist, a keynote speaker, and just a really cool person. Amy Green Smith, welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to connect with you ladies today.
Oh, we're so grateful. And something Andrea left out was the confidence piece, that you help with confidence, people stepping into their power, listening and trusting their voice. That's something we've talked about so much on this podcast with my health journey, seeing over 50 different doctors, having to advocate for myself. So whether you're an entrepreneur or a mother or whoever you are, we all need some more confidence, especially in this world. So Amy, I'm curious, let's go back how you got into this work of helping people find their voice and speak their truth.
Well, I was just born this way. No, just kidding. I think like most of us, I think yourselves included, that a lot of the work that we end up doing in the world is informed by our own personal experience. And my situation is not dissimilar. So for a bit of context, I grew up in an extremely conservative, born-again Christian family. My father had a master's in divinity and a doctorate in ministry.
Wow.
Andrea's face. Yeah, so I like to say he wasn't fucking around. He was not fucking around. And so I grew up with a lot of motivation from a place of guilt and fear, from a punitive deity that demanded praise. And so there was a lot around being good, taking care of everybody else, making sure that I was the good girl, really, and checked off all of those boxes. And so I really was kind of the quintessential older child, where I started working when I was 14, put myself through college, got married young, moved out of the house, was very independent. And then juxtaposed against my two younger siblings, they both had a lot of difficulty with the law, did jail time, had to get shipped off to boarding schools, like really sort of tumultuous youths. And, you know, this all comes full circle in 2007 when my father passed away. And at the time, I was just getting into personal development. I was really enveloped by law of attraction at the time. And that's when The Secret came out, and it was, you know, this big buzz term. And, you know, I felt very strongly, because I had a background in makeup artistry, that I was going to do his makeup for his viewing.
Wow.
So this is Dead Dad makeup time, everybody.
I did not see this coming.
Oh.
Yeah, it's unleashed, right? It's Ivy Unleashed.
Hell
That's
yeah.
right, baby.
Yes. So I felt like it would be a real dick move if I had this incredible skill set and kind of like, oh, Dad, get your own makeup artist. Like, no, of course I'm going to do his makeup. And I spoke to a crowd of hundreds of people. He had a pretty incredible impact in his world. And we get back home to my mom's house, and she finds it the most opportune time to tell me that she feels as though my father and her had failed as parents, because the three of us, grouping me in with my younger siblings, were not subscribed to the faith traditions we were raised in. Specifically, we were not, quote, walking with the Lord. And that really was the impetus for me, because up until that point, I had the veneer, I had the shape shifting down. I would prep my partner every time we come home to my parents' house. No cussing, no liberal agenda, no drinking, no Jon Stewart, no South Park, like just don't. And that was the first time that I really decided that what I wanted and what I believed deserved a voice, even if it was in direct opposition to how I was raised. So the only thing I could kind of muster in that moment was to say, I don't think you should say that to a child. And like, maybe this is a teaching moment for her. And she said, well, that's just how I feel. And that really became such a pivotal moment for me because I don't believe that speaking up for yourself, advocating for yourself, saying no is always an ultimatum. In fact, I think far more often it is not an ultimatum. However, if push comes to shove and I have to decide between making you happy or making me happy, I'm going to choose me. And that sounds awesome, right? That sounds fantastic. Well, the trajectory after that was a shit show. I was adversarial, combative. I wanted to fight. I wanted to talk about abortion. I wanted to talk about gay rights. And I think I was also bolstered by the idea that now it wasn't one against two with my father. Now it was me and my mom. And I was like, I can take her. And it wasn't until many, many times of taking back my delivery, how I spoke to her, not what I believed, that I realized, oh shit, you can actually speak up for yourself with the utmost kindness and grace and poise and respect. And so what that sounded like for me was circling back with her many times and saying, hey, listen, I still feel very strongly about what we discussed the other day. However, I should have never said it in that way. You don't deserve to be spoken to in that manner. And for that, I'm really, really sorry. And I think that was a huge lesson because for so many of us, we think that if we speak up, we have to be incredibly acerbic and biting and adversarial because that's sort of the message that we get, right? If you're an outspoken woman, you're a bitch, you're shrill, you're naggy. And I found that that's truly a fallacy and that it is possible to ask for a divorce with such compassion and kindness. Ask adult children to move out of the house. Tell your family, I'm not interested in your commentary about what I choose to consume or what I choose to feed my children. And you can do all of that with grace and kindness.
So beautiful. And I feel like too, following you and hearing your podcast, that is what I've taken from it. I feel like you give us language that can really help communicate how we feel, and it doesn't put it all on them. It doesn't put it all on us. And it's just, I think, skills that we're not totally taught. Like, you can be modeled some things, but when you're in a difficult, high stress situation, to have this language is really important. And I think, every human being has had to have difficult conversations or knows they need to. And so I'm so happy that you're so eloquent, and the way that you deliver this is really showing, I care about this person. I know they care about me. How can we do this? But I want to back the train up a bit because you said something earlier, and I've heard this in some of your podcasts, where if you don't speak up for yourself, it's a threat to your self-confidence, your self-worth. And so I would love to talk about that, because sometimes people, they don't even get to the difficult conversation. They avoid the conversation. So can we talk about self-worth and just kind of getting yourself to the point where you're allowing yourself to even entertain the idea of a difficult conversation?
Sure. And something we can circle back to, if you're interested, is the reason why we have that compulsion to be quiet. We're not doing that to be like, hey, I can't wait to be a doormat. We're doing that to genuinely take care of ourselves, right? Like, they're one of our primary human needs. Like, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is one of belonging. We're wired for connection. So if we feel like somebody doesn't approve of us, or our in-laws don't really like us that much, or, so-and-so in accounting doesn't think we're doing a good job, our lizard brain registers as, I'm not safe. I could possibly die if I'm not a part of this group. So I think it's really important that we underline that. Get in line. A majority of us don't want confrontation. When people tell me, actually, I really hate confrontation. I'm like, oh, I love it. Like, no, we don't fucking love it. We don't want to do it. Yes, we have a handful of those folks in our life who are always looking for a fight. They are few and far between. I would say a majority of us don't want to have these awkward interactions with people. But what we have to understand, and Andrea, you set this up so perfectly, is that it's directly tethered to our self-worth. if you think about it, every time you choose to stay silent, when you're offended, when you're hurt, when you think there's a better option, what you are doing is sending a repeated message to your subconscious mind that my wants and opinions don't matter as much as that other person. But we wrap it up in all this nobility, right? We have all of these idioms like, I just don't want to rock the boat. I want to sweep it under the rug. I don't want to open up a can of worms. And all of those things are ways to get us to stay fucking quiet. So when I'm talking to you about saying no, establishing boundaries, having difficult conversations, it is not some arbitrary personal development exercise just to make you uncomfortable. It's because your self-worth literally depends on it. Because if I'm operating in my life where I let everyone else's voice matter more than mine, everyone else's opinions, desires, wants are more important than mine, now I have nailed that into my subconscious as a belief that I just don't matter as much. So no wonder it's difficult for you to launch your practice or to go to yoga training school. No wonder you feel like you're not worthy of entering the dating scene again, or you think you're going to fuck up your kids. Like, no wonder all of these life issues are a problem because you aren't anchored into this idea that you matter and that your voice matters.
My gosh. Can we just I just love the way you speak because it's so powerful and it's so true. And we have to think about that message that we're sending to ourselves. Like sometimes I think moms will be like, okay, I got to show my kid how to stand up for themselves, or they're at school and I got to teach them how to stand up for themselves. But you're also sending a message to yourself, which reflects in everything you're doing. If you're not able to stand up for yourself or find a way to address the difficult conversations, find a way to speak up when someone says something that lights you up internally and then you don't do anything about it, like that. I'm a person that I don't have this problem where I'm like, okay, I just calm down, let this one go. I am more of like a fighter, and I have the opposite where I'm not going to let anybody treat me like shit. Absolutely not. Not in this world. No, I have enough friends. I don't need someone treating me like shit. So I don't need that conversation. But when you have such a close relationship with your partner, with your kids, with your best friend, with your sister, with whoever, getting that conversation going can be challenging because how do I bring this up?
Yes.
How do I get them to talk with me about it? Because we need a one-on-one, but I don't want to freak them out, but I don't want them to think about it too much before the conversation. I have a lot I want to say, and I've also heard you speak about this, and I would love for you to talk through how to get the conversation going when you know you need to talk with someone about something that's bothering you. And it's very anxiety provoking and you want it to be something that comes with love and a resolution. How do you kind of get that difficult conversation going?
Ooh, okay. So there are a couple of things that you can do. I've got a bunch of hacks for you. But first and foremost, you got to get conversation consent. So I think all of us have had that experience where we've been taken off guard. It could be, a boss, someone you work with. It could be a partner, even a kid that's like, well, I need to talk to you right now. We need to talk. And then they just drop this bomb on you and you're completely not prepared. And also, you're way more in your defenses. So one of the ways that we can set ourselves up for success is to make sure that that person isn't operating from their fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, right? That they're genuinely able to hear you. And that's what we all really want. Whenever we're having a conversation, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we typically want something rectified. So we have to remember that going into that conversation, we need to think about how would I respond to me if I was in their shoes. Would I be like, yay, I can't wait to work on this? Or would I be like, oh my gosh, she's yelling and screaming. I need to run. I need to just appease, placate. We go into our defense mechanisms. So getting consent, not only is it respectful, but it sets up the conversation to be on a platform of respect and not intense emotional charge. So what that sounds like, and I highly, highly suggest that you don't say, we need to talk. I would suggest that you say, I would love to run some stuff by you. I've really been thinking about our conversation the other day and would just love to get your thoughts on a couple of things. Something that's less triggering. In the history of all conversations, I doubt we need to talk really went well. I mean, that's speculation, but so asking for the time to talk. The other thing that is really important to understand here is if they ask you what it's about, think about how you would feel if someone's like, hey, I'd really like to run some stuff by you. And you go, oh, really? What's it regarding? And they say, we'll talk about it later. Like rumination. If you've got anxiety, guess what's coming in, right? Oh, the worst case scenario. What if? So do them a service and give them a light idea of what it's referring to. Hey, I don't think we should get into it right now. I'd love to give you some time to kind of process it as well. But I don't feel fully settled about our conversation that we had about the kids' school. Or I'd really love to go over some of the stuff that came up in the meeting about the Johnson report. I don't know, whatever. Something like that, where you're telling them a little bit, but then boundary it up by saying, I certainly don't think this is the time to get into it. I'd love for you to kind of think about it as well. And let's just sit down and revisit. Another huge piece that is in your favor is operating from a place of vulnerability within safe parameters. Not every situation is safe to be vulnerable with. If you're with somebody who's a malignant narcissist, who is weaponizes your vulnerability, those sorts of things. I'm not talking about using that with those sorts of individuals. But we have mirror neurons in the brain. We will naturally mimic other people. We have emotional contagion where we catch feels, as the kids would say, right? Where you will catch the emotional frequency that somebody else is embodying. So knowing that, I mean, it really is a defense mechanism to help us survive. But if we go in to a conversation embodying vulnerability, and I'll tell you exactly what that sounds like, we are far more likely to elicit that from the other person. So if you go in guns blazing, ready to do battle, and you're like, hey, listen, this is not acceptable and this can't happen again, and you're just stoic and rigid, you are more likely to elicit defensive responses from that other person. However, if you go in with vulnerability, and there's two things that you can use here. One element of vulnerability is owning your shit, like just saying, here's what I could do differently. And I'll give you a couple of examples. And then also gratitude. Like, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. That's a vulnerable statement. Doesn't mean you have to say, oh my gosh, when I was 7, I stole candy from this, and like bare your soul vulnerably. It doesn't mean that. It just means sharing how you feel, sharing your emotional frequency within your safety parameters. So that might sound something like, using the examples I had earlier with my mom. Hey, listen, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. I know this isn't easy. And first off, the stuff that has been going on in my mind, the things that have been bothering me, you would have no idea. And that is so unbelievably unfair to you. And if the situation was reversed, I would want you to be able to tell me what's going on. So first, I just have to say, I'm really sorry that it's taken me this long to even say anything, right? You're not saying that how you feel is wrong or that what you're going to ask for is incorrect. You're just saying, like, this is the element I need to own. I've been building this whole story about you and your intention that may or may not be true. And that's unfair. And I appreciate this relationship. So those are a couple of things that you can use to kind of get going that set it up. And I call that the conversation container. They set up the conversation container to be safe and productive.
Brilliant. Just brilliant.
Isn't it?
Well, I'm thinking of how much anxiety you have coming into a difficult conversation, right? It's something you know you're going to benefit from having, but it's almost like that inner critic too. It just goes and it goes and it goes. So I'd love to get into that. of we talk a lot about, okay, becoming aware of your inner critic so you can do something with it. But I do feel like it's a dance between becoming aware of it and then not letting it own and dictate your life. Like how to move through those thoughts and have maybe a nicer inner critic. So I'd love to hear your tips and advice on that.
Well, I have an arsenal of tools around that, but I would love to share with you one that I use quite frequently. But before I do, just to mention what you said about, I have all this trepidation, this anxiety. One of the things you can do is just call that out and say, hey, listen, I have so much anxiety about this because my worst fear is this is going to sever our relationship. My worst fear is you're not going to realize how much I value you. Say the thing, say how much anxiety. That's also vulnerable to say, this has been really difficult for me. And also, if you can draw in how much the relationship means to you, whether it's a workplace, saying something like, it means a lot to me to get this right because I really value what we do here and I love working here. Or I know this is so uncomfortable and I feel so clunky sharing this, but I care about our relationship enough that I really want to get this right. So that's another way to use your vulnerability. So let's talk about this inner critic. So the way that the human brain works is if we don't know the ending to a story, we will complete it. We will try to close that loop. It's the same reason why cliffhangers drive us up a wall when we watch a show or a movie that doesn't end well. We're like, that's not what makes sense. So if we don't have the complete picture of what somebody's thinking, what they're feeling, what they meant by what they said, we will fill it in. And we fill it in based off of warding off threat. So humans are motivated by two primary primitive motivations: the pursuit of pleasure, the avoidance of pain. However, the avoidance of pain is exponentially more intense for us. It's why we compare to other people. We are constantly going, does that person threaten my business? Does that person threaten my relationship? We're constantly looking for any sense of threat. So of course, when we're making up stories, we're making up all these worst case possible scenarios. So one of my favorite tools that I've created is called Find My Truth, and it's an acronym, FMT. The F stands for what are the facts? Facts are not beliefs, right? Beliefs are just simply a feeling of certainty. If I say to you, I believe that I am worthy, I can't fucking prove that. We can't do, the scientific process. There's no data that supports it other than I have a feeling of certainty that it's true. Facts are something that we know are true. And most of the time when we take the facts, we jump to a conclusion about them that isn't rooted in that data. So the second piece, the M, is what am I making up? Here are the facts. What am I making up? And then the T stands for truth. What is my truth? Or what else could be true? For example, years ago, we were renovating our home, getting prepared to move across the country. And my husband had brought all of our patio furniture into the living room where I always did my workouts. And because we were renovating the patio, the only thing he says to me, the only phrase, are you still doing your workouts in the living room? That was the only thing. And I said, oh, no. And then in my mind, I immediately went, he is grossed out by me. He thinks that I'm not paying attention to my health and wellness. He doesn't find me attractive anymore if I'm not working out. And I start going into all of this story. And so I said to him, I said, I just need to tell you where I went in my head, right? Taking ownership of it. Here's where I went. And I tell him, and he goes, oh, no, that's not what I was thinking at all. I was thinking I've just moved all the patio furniture into the living room, and I just wanted to make sure I was being respectful that you had space to work out. Oh.
Oops.
And And it's like, oh, ooh. So thinking about that, there are situations when you do source the information and it's not what you want. So I've had similar situations with friendships where both of them told me they couldn't make it to my birthday party for my 40th birthday, kind of last minute, and both of them said it was a financial issue. One person I went to and said, hey, I just saw that you posted about this vacation you're taking. Here's where I went in my head. You can't come to my birthday because of money, but you have all this money for a European vacation. Turns out her parents were paying for the entire thing. She was like, I have zero money. My mom is paying for everything. That's the only reason I'm going. And it's that because of a death of a relative that she feels really pressed that I be there. The other friend was basically like, yeah, you caught me. So you sometimes will get information or data that you don't love. But I would say far more often than not, we fabricate a story that is not anchored in reality at all. It's usually anchored in fear, warding off threat, etc. So using this, what are the facts of the situation? This can be really helpful if you've been ruminating about something that somebody said. Mm-hmm. What are the facts? What have I made up? And that's usually like, and all of a sudden you're destitute on the street, like at the end of what you've made up. And then what else could be true? What else could be true outside of this story that I've made up?
I love that. And my brain is going to people pleasing because I think, okay, yes, it's great to be vulnerable, share with you these dark thoughts that I'm having. And then the inner critic comes back and is like, well, don't share that. That's silly. Why would you think that? They're going to think you're weird. I don't know. You don't want to rock the boat. So how does this, in your mind, tie into people pleasing?
Well, people pleasing is one of those things that I think in the personal development space, we have these like blanket concepts like people pleasing is always bad or perfectionism is always wrong or you don't want to try to control everything. And I think there's a lot more nuance to that. So people pleasing is a direct iteration of our fawn fear response. So if we're talking about our primitive ancestors, we've all heard fight, flight, freeze. There's a newer one that is kind of new into the psychological conversation around fawning. And if we're talking about dealing with a mountain lion, so to speak, and it's about to attack us, to fawn in the face of that fear would be like, here, kitty, kitty, here's some food, go over there. It's placating, it's acquiescing in order to stay safe. And I would also argue that there are probably many people listening who developed people pleasing as a protective mechanism growing up. Mm-hmm. For many of us, we dealt with aggressive or insufficient caregivers. Maybe they were abusive. Maybe they were just in their own world and didn't have the bandwidth to even pay attention much to you. Gen X, where are you at with your with your boomer and older parents? So I think it's important for us to understand that we don't develop that to go, okay, I'm just going to make my life really difficult so that I never am going to speak up again. No. We develop that so that we can stay safe. We realize that placating that parent or that caregiver allowed us to fly under the radar. But then we get to a place, usually in our early adulthood or later, where we go, oh, this behavior isn't serving me anymore. And in fact, it is thwarting the things that I want. But I know that you've had a really great conversation with another hypnotherapist about how Kat, I believe, about how the subconscious mind works and how things are ingrained into the subconscious. So basically what happens there is the brain registers either knowns or unknowns. So we develop a known association with people pleasing, and therefore it is safe. So if we introduce this idea that's unknown of being confident, of speaking up for ourselves, the brain goes, are you sure, bitch? We don't know that one. We don't know. And it's not trying to make you miserable. It's just checking for congruency with the subconscious, what we already know. So that's why we self-sabotage, even though we know consciously that we don't want to consume this type of sugar, or we want to finish this business proposal or whatever. there's something that's happening in the subconscious mind that is in a direct refutation to that, to what we're trying to change. So as far as people pleasing, what you have to recognize is you probably have a positive association with it because it helped you in some way. What's also great about those sorts of beliefs is that they're malleable. We do have neuroplasticity. We can change the neural pathways in the brain. So what that means is we have to start doing something habitually that is in direct opposition. So with people pleasing in particular, I use a concept called progressive language. And I think you talked about this a little bit with Kat as well, where instead of saying like, I'm capable of speaking up for myself, we use something that's progressive on the beginning of it. Something like, I'm exploring what using my voice looks like. I'm open to being somebody who speaks up for themselves. I'm reevaluating my relationship with my self-worth. I am on my way to loving my body. I think the example she used was, I like the idea of believing this thing. And basically what that does, and this also happens in hypnosis, is it's like if you think about your inner critic being like a little guard dog, and it's checking for everything that's coming through the conscious part of the mind to make sure it matches with what you know in the subconscious. So it barks like crazy if you try to say, I can speak up for myself. It's like, no, you can't. No, you can't. That's not what's going on down here. So using progressive language is like giving it a little greenie, giving it a little chew toy. It's like, fine, I'll allow it. I'll allow it. And so we need sort of a workaround. And when you're in a hypnotic trance, that inner critic, that guard dog essentially goes to sleep. So it's one of the ways we can fast track changing beliefs like that. But I find personally, and I'm curious what you all think, I find it so comforting to know that this is all just science. This is just how the brain works. So many people think that they are uniquely broken. And I'm like, no, you're not broken. You just have some shit beliefs we need to get rid of. You are not your beliefs. We can change those. Those are malleable and they're not facts. But typically we want to dig our heels and go, no, I really am not worthy. No, I really am not okay with that. No, but you're not exempt from the science.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great point. That's why we love the brain so much, because we always talk about like, we all have things we struggle with, but we don't have to stay stuck in them. And that's why we have on guests like you that can walk you through this, that can talk to you in a way that helps you understand that it can be a new belief and it might take a bit to shift the subconscious beliefs because it's ingrained in you, but it's not permanent. And I love that. And something I keep thinking about too with Brooke's age, my age, your age, and I feel like as we age, we start to care less about what people think. But we started this talking about belonging. And I'm curious your take on, clearly we care more about what people think because we want to belong when we're younger. Like for me, it was just so terrible for me as a kid. I was like, oh, I don't want to be the only kid in the class with divorced parents, And then as I get older, I'm like, it's more common, or it's not that big of a deal, or my parents are friends now, so whatever. So over time, I've cared less about it or whatever, as an example. But when it comes to the opinions of others, I do feel like there is something about getting older that you give less fucks. Like you are whatever, like who cares what she thinks? But when you're younger, I think in your 20s especially, and you're trying to figure out who you are. So I'm curious your take on that. Like, one, why we care so much about what other people think, and then why over time maybe we care less, or maybe tools to care less as you age.
This is really great. So what we have to understand about that belonging element, the reason why Maslow's hierarchy of needs includes the need for belonging is completely relative to our primitive ancestors. There was no survival if you did not belong to a group. There was no tribe of one out there just fucking hunting and living life. No, you had to belong to a group in order to survive. Now, that primitive sort of lizard brain element is still with us. That is why we care so much what other people think. Again, and we don't ever consciously think this, But you, as a little kid going into class, for example, what's happening primitively, subconsciously is I might not survive this. I might actually die if these kids don't accept me into the fold. You don't consciously think that ever, but that's what's running in the system. And if anybody caught the conversation with Kat, she's spot on in that our subconscious mind, depending who you talk to, is like 90 to 95% of our mind's power. So that means consciously what you're thinking, like, okay, that's irrational. Nobody's gonna ostracize me. That's ridiculous. Guess which one is going to win in the mind if there's 95% saying you might be ostracized, they might not love you, they might not care for you. So I think one part of it is just recognizing we're wired this way as humans. Then add in the extra component of being either a female or femme presenting in our culture. And now you have another level of oppression where we have said very systematically and intentionally to little girls, you are responsible for the emotions of other people. So we're going to give you toys that are about caretaking and nurturing a baby, taking care of all these needs, or how to cook and put together these meals. And meanwhile, boys get to be the firemen and they get to have the NASA kits and learn about science. So we have to give credence to the conditioning that we receive socially as well. So we've got this primitive element, we've got a social element, which, by the way, is exponentially worse if you find yourself in any other marginalized identity. If you're also in a fat body, which I use the word fat through a liberatory lens. If you're in a queer body, a disabled body, a Black and brown body, you have an extra layer of culture saying, prove that you're worthy, prove that you're enough. So the cards are stacked against us. So yes, we do have to do something on a collective level. I think that's where our vote comes in. So I think and believe wholeheartedly that one of the fiercest acts of resistance against oppression is believing in yourself, is saying, I am enough. I deserve to rest. I deserve to play. I deserve wealth. I deserve pleasure. In a world and a society that says, not for you. No, not for you. So I think that on a nuclear standpoint, for each of us independently, for the sisterhood, for the resistance, for the future, it's imperative that we take up some goddamn space, that we believe that we are enough. I took a social justice class in the summer of 2020, and I was struck by a lot of the parallels between this work and social reform. And one of the things that stood out to me was that systems of oppression are allowed to stay in power as long as the oppressed party continues to believe that they're not enough. So the longer women think we deserve to get 83 cents on the dollar, we will stay there. As long as we believe that our place is in the home, or which is all fabricated, by the way, that we have to embody these specific characteristics to be the right type of woman, the longer we stay oppressed. And that's the case for anybody else, believing that people who are straight are better than who I am as a queer person, or, any other marginalized identity. So if you need an altruistic, bigger picture reason to work on your self-worth, which again, we talked about why that's tethered to speaking up, this is it. It's for our children. It's for the future. It's for us. It's for the resistance. Yeah, I get worked up about that one.
Wow, I know, I can tell, and I love it.
And I love too the examples you gave earlier of what can we say to start really believing that. Because right now it may sound or seem scary to say, I am worthy of taking up space. I am worthy of wealth. And inside your subconscious is like, bitch, no, you ain't.
Yeah.
But you like the idea of it. You are working on believing that. So starting with those affirmations to help you feel empowered, that's what's needed to start making that change of that belief. I believe, and that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can create change through a handful of different processes. I like to tackle it through a bunch of different entry points. So when I work with my clients to change a belief like this, that I deserve to take up space, that I'm capable, that I'm enough. Oh, look at all that.
I know.
I love it.
Oh,
Now you're frozen. Shoot. It's a cool spot to be frozen
yeah,
on.
you're frozen with fireworks. I don't know if you can hear us.
So I like to look at these 4 different elements. One is changing our beliefs through the conscious part of the mind. So remember, that's like, depending who you talk to, about 5% of the mind's power. That's where we have logic, reason, rationale, willpower. So we want to attack that as well as the subconscious mind. So we want to be doing something that's working with that subconscious faculty. And we can do that a handful of different ways. I personally love hypnosis, and specifically subliminal hypnosis, where the mind can actually pick up on the sentiments that are being shared, but it just kind of sounds like music to the conscious mind. We're just distracting. If you've ever seen a hypnotherapist snap during a session, all that is doing is going to the subconscious mind, like, oh, something to pay attention to over here. Oh, there was a noise, which allows the subconscious to just absorb a lot of the messaging that's coming in. I also think we can target that by our behavior, what we choose to do, and then also our environment, who we choose to hang out with, who we are surrounded by. So all of these elements are entry points to work with your self-worth. So consciously, what I tend to advocate for is what I call mirror work, where you engage with yourself in a mirror and you use verbiage that you can buy into. So I typically use progressive language, like I am exploring what it looks like to love my body, or I am re-engineering my relationship with trust, even, all sorts of different things. But saying that in a mirror, subconsciously, that usually looks like some element of hypnosis or subliminal track. Behaviorally is acting as though it's like, if I believed that I was a badass businesswoman, how would I go into this conversation? How would I pitch this particular media outlet? How would I fill in the blank? So we're looking at our behavior, and then environment. If I believed that I was valuable, if I believed I deserved to take up space, would I tolerate this behavior from my partner, from my family, from my workplace, from my friendships? So all of these things can be entry points to help you start altering your relationship with your belief about yourself. So you can ask yourself, is somebody who believed that they are enough, would their behavior look like this? Somebody who believed that they mattered, would their environment look like this? Is somebody who believed that they deserve to take up space, what would they be saying to themselves in the mirror? And then what would they be saying to themselves subconsciously? And starting to work with those as tools.
Oh, so good, Amy.
Powerful.
So good. And I cannot wait for everyone to rewind and replay. Replay. Because that is life-changing. This whole conversation has been life-changing. With that piece is something that everyone can start doing right now.
It's the examples of the empowered questions, because I think a lot of times we'll get the advice like, ask yourself empowered questions, but it's like what? Like, what's the question?
What are you doing?
I love the way that you speak here today and on your podcast, where it's really being able to put it into action. What would that sound like? What would that look like? If I were to stand in front of a mirror, what could I say? And so we want everybody to know where to find you. So they want to hear more from you. You have about 500 episodes on your podcast. So I think that's a great place to start, and then let everybody know where they can follow you and find you and work with you.
Yeah. So my corner of the internet is over at amygreensmith.com. And all of those names are spelled the basic bitch way. Nothing super fun. I'm all over social media under the handle, Hey, Amy Greensmith. But like any self-respecting Gen Xer, I hang out the most on Instagram. But yeah, if you come over to my site, I've got some free hypnosis track around anxiety and fear. I have a free workbook for you that is all about some of these very tangible, action-oriented practices to help you speak up for yourself and cultivate that sense of self-worth. And then if you are interested in doing a deep dive, you'll see additional ways to check out my signature program, which is called Worthy. And it is no joke. It is 9 months of deep dive interpersonal work. And I would say one of the biggest takeaways that people have is being so anchored into that belief that I am enough. Oh, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, I am worthy 100%. And yeah, so check it out, and yeah, come hang out and get some freebies and learn some stuff. I'd be super honored.
Awesome. Wonderful. And we always leave our listeners with three. I mean, you've given us so much gold. Like Brooke said, I'm going to listen back to this too, because there's so many little tips, ways to interact with people that I think add so much value. And so for you to leave our listeners with 3 gold stars, 3 tangible tips, what would you give them? Or what do you want to give them?
Ooh, okay. So the first one is, I would say, work with that tool of Find My Truth, the acronym FMT. What are the facts? What am I making up? What else could be true? I would also say one of my favorite ways to get to the bottom of where might I need to speak up is by taking a bit of an inventory of who are the people that I chronically complain about that I have not voiced my grievance to. A lot of times, like Andrea, you might be upset with Brooke, but it's your partner who gets the earful. Or I might be really upset with my brother and it's the other brother who gets the earful, right? So sometimes we're speaking up, but we're not speaking up to the party who can do a damn thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not talking about just purging and needing to vent out your day. I'm talking about a habitual grievance that would be a surprise to that other person, or at least the impact, how big of a deal this is to you, would be a surprise to that other person. So start taking an inventory. Is there somebody that I chronically and consistently complain about, but I don't take action? That's usually a big blaring symbol for you that a boundary conversation or a tough conversation is in order. And the more we shed the awareness and the light on that, the more uncomfortable it becomes. So once you've turned that light switch on, it's real hard to turn it off. So you'll start seeing like, oh, I really need to say something. I really need to say something. And then the final thing I'll say is to observe your entry points. If you are somebody who, let's say, you want the belief of I am enough, or I am worthy, or even I'm capable of speaking up for myself. Go through those 4 elements. What do I need to do subconsciously? How can I use hypnosis or even listening to things as I'm going to sleep? There's tons of apps for that now. How can I start embedding this idea that I am enough consciously? Working with progressive language, saying something like, I'm on my way to, I'm exploring what self-worth looks like. Observing your environment, observing your behavior, those 2 elements. As somebody who believes that they are enough, would I behave this way? As somebody who believes that I am enough, what needs to shift in my environment? And I think that should keep you busy for a while.
I love it. I'm having so many thoughts over here. I just want to open up a journal and just write it all out. And the idea of playing something when you go to bed too, right? We were traveling for work and we were playing meditation of, I am successful. I am successful. We're like, we're weirdos or we're brilliant over here. But either way, it's making us feel better.
Well, we were at the biggest event that we've had. Like, something's working. And yeah, just the acknowledgement that the subconscious is running the show here. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, we can't just think that this 5% is the truth and like that's the only thing to work on. Like, there is a deeper thing going on here. And I think there's no accident that we've had a couple hypnotists on lately, because they will help you if you need someone to kind of be like, maybe I should have someone help me out with this. And I'm so happy that the 2 that we've had on, we've had on probably more that I don't know for sure, but it's important to have someone too that has a personality that's warm and fun and is another human being that could kind of walk you through how this has transformed your life and how it could transform there. So that's very cool. Yeah. All right. And then we have Unleashing Ivy, 3 surprise questions for you, which this whole thing's been surprise. So whatever. But I am so curious about you because, from hardly knowing you, number one, my first interaction is with your assistant, who is also vibrant and funny and quirky and has a funny signature. And just, I feel like you have people around you that are awesome because you're awesome. Mm-hmm. But you've been married for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's so beautiful. And that requires to me, that's work, right? That is showing up and being intentional with this relationship. And I want the inside scoop, of just what you really feel like it's taken to have what you have. If it's something simple, if it's a few deep things, like what do you think is kind of your secret to having this 25-year marriage? Starting at 20.
Yeah. Well, first, I have to say that I don't think everybody is wired for like long-term relationship like that. I do feel a sense of personal pride, and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. But I don't think that monogamy is for everybody. I don't think that being with one person for a really long time needs to be every single person's goal. So I'll just say that, because I do find that there are people who have had really rich learning and growth experiences from like a 10-year marriage, or, and sometimes it's been racked with incredible pain. But I do think it's important that we say there's multiple ways to be in relationship, and sometimes it's polyamory or ethical non-monogamy. I don't know, so I'll leave it at that. But as far as, I'll tell you something that I think has been pivotal for us that I can frame up in sort of a tool for everybody. And it's this idea between the surface issue and the root issue. So most of the time in relationships, we will go to blows and fight about who is right about a surface issue. And what we're usually arguing about is how we feel about the surface issue. So I'll give you an example. Let's say with your partner, you are arguing like crazy about the right way to load the dishwasher, right? All big fights stem from something innocuous and stupid. So, but you will double down that the forks need to go this way. And all of a sudden you're becoming so heated about the damn dishwasher. And it's like, you can keep litigating your case as long as you keep talking about the surface issue. You can keep fighting for who's right, and you get nowhere. But if you talk about the root issue, it's about how both of you feel about what is transpiring with the surface issue. So for you, it might be, I don't feel heard. I feel like I ask something for our relationship or for harmony in the household, and it falls on ears that cannot hear me. I feel disrespected. I feel like I'm handling all of the workload. The other person might feel like I can never do anything right. Every single thing that I try to do, you nitpick me to death. Now we're talking about the root issue. Now we're talking about how each of us feel. And one of the sort of governing ideologies that we've had in our relationship is, how can we source a solution where both people feel honored? So instead of trying to fight for one person gets to win and be right, it's how can we work through this so that both people feel honored? And that has been like our consistent come back to of like, this, I can't say yes to this, or I need more than that. And the other person not making them wrong for it. One thing that we do consistently is when the other person is in some sort of emotional distress or just not even feeling their best, the other person immediately says, how can I be amazing for you? What do you need from me? How can I support you the best? instead of what we usually do, which is, well, you need to go see the doctor. Well, you need to see the therapist. Why don't you read that? You work too much. You did it, right? We want to fix instead of feel. But most of the time when we're in discomfort, we just want to be witnessed. We want to be seen or heard. So I will tell you that. Start analyzing what is the root issue beneath the behavior that you're fighting about. What does it mean to you? What does it say to you? That will give you a lot more fodder to discuss the things that are of merit. And then I would say have a conversation with your partner and say, let's just start asking each other instead of fixing it. Let's just start asking each other, what do you need the most from me right now? How can I support you the best? And if they don't know, that's okay. You can offer suggestions like, do you want to be left alone? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need to cry? Do you want to go have a workout? What do you need? And so you can give suggestions, but just allowing them to be where they are is so unbelievably powerful. So unbelievably powerful, instead of feeling like you need to fix it. Just
that could save a marriage. That could be a light for someone to realize how devalued they are. Those two tips alone are just life-changing tips. I hope you recognize, I'm sure you do, because this is what you do, but how valuable you are, that you're able to eloquently put this in a way that people can understand, see themselves at the dishwasher and understand how to get from A to Z. And it's all about just having these healthy relationships and feeling seen and heard. It goes back to the belonging at the beginning. And I just think that's so powerful for anybody to hear how you potentially could be spoken to, or how you could change your language to make the person you love the most feel honored. Like, oh, thank you for sharing that. It was beautiful.
Absolutely. I mean, and that has been something, like it's been well over 2 decades of curating and working through that stuff. But I'll tell you what, we were just talking about this. One of the things we've been implementing lately we have like sex dates, right? And that was another thing that got curated based off of how each of us operate. And so we have these sex dates. And lately we've been saying, do you have any requests?
Oh,
Do you have any attire requests? Like, would you like, and then both of us are like, okay, I can accommodate that. Or if one person's coming on to the other person, we'll say, is this a sexual advance? Well, your sexual advance has been accepted.
I love it.
what do you say if it's denied?
You can say, I would like a rain check on your sexual advance.
I love it. I love the language.
But yeah, so much of it is just learning how to communicate together and make it fun and playful too.
Yeah. And I think having that healthy relationship, it's got to come back to first having a healthy relationship with yourself, feeling confident in your body, confident in who you are, your worth. And I believe a lot of that has to do with our vibration. You spoke earlier about law of attraction. So my question is about, what is one practice, one tool you use to help keep your vibration high when we're talking about law of attraction and frequency? Because you are magnetic. There's no question about it. So how do you keep that and cultivate that? Like a tool or something you want to share?
Gosh, there's so many different things. One is I've gotten really, really clear about how I operate best. And I don't make any apologies about it. So since I've had my company for the last 15 or so years, I've become incredibly introverted. So I'm gregarious, I'm outspoken, I'm kind of an outgoing introvert. But as far as what fills me up and generates energy for me, it's not around a bunch of people. I have to recover from that. So I've had to learn that even though people really want me to come to something, or it would be so sexy to be spontaneous, I'm like, I am not she. Okay. I am not she. And I tell all my friends, like, you are always more than welcome to ask me hey, I'm in the neighborhood. Do you want to go? I will almost always say no. I absolutely hate fucking last minute plans. It stresses me the fuck out. So you can ask all day, just know I will very rarely, if ever, take you up on it. So it's partly those things. But also, when somebody is that boundaried and that clear of like, here's how to win with me, here's how to not win with me, you feel so safe, right? There's no twisting and like, oh, does Amy like this? Does she not like this? It's like, no, this is how I operate, and you don't need to be that way at all. But just know this is how I'm going to show up. I'm usually, and I am very still trying to wrap my head around this, unusually slow at everything. Every class I'm in, I will be the last person to leave. It takes me the longest to pack up my shit. I've been working on a book for 10 years. Like, just my pace is slower than a lot of folks. That doesn't bode well when you're in the internet, like, marketing space. It's like, no, hustle. Oh, now Periscope's a thing. You need to be on Periscope. Now Threads is a thing, and you need to do this. And I'm just like, wah. And so knowing how I operate in my business too helps me not get sidetracked into the latest thing, or you have to market this way. So I think just genuinely doing the work, and a lot of that is values work, I think, for me, in knowing who I am, how I operate, and then just not apologizing for it as sort of a habitual way of being has been impactful.
So would you say you standing in your truth of who you are and expressing it and creating the boundaries, that elevates your vibration and you attract things that align with that?
Totally. Well, I mean, it's very much like what you choose to tolerate keeps showing up. It doesn't have to be as mystical as we think it is. It's a matter of like, what's on my radar. And if what's on my radar is constantly worrying about what other people think, then I'm probably going to be attracting people who are making me jump through those hoops. But the more I've been anchored into how I operate, who I am, what I will and won't tolerate, I basically have no takers in my life. Like, I don't have people who don't have a reciprocal relationship with me. I don't have to worry too much about that anymore. I used to, but now it's been this like curated life of like, everybody around me operates very similarly to how I do. And so you start to magnetize that. I like to say, when you're talking about attraction and stuff, the more you get anchored into your enoughness, your bullshit tolerance gets a lot less.
Yes.
So the stuff that you would allow, you just don't allow anymore. Therefore, attracting other things, right? So it doesn't, I think sometimes we think it's more mystical than it really is. It's just a matter of what you're choosing to tolerate.
Oh, this is so true. And I just was explaining this to my kids because my whole life I've heard like, you've had such great people for boyfriends. You've had such deep friendships. You've had such I've attracted more like healthy relationships. Yeah. But from a young age, and I do think it's because of divorce and because of how my mom kind of was, like, she's like a no bullshit person. Like, she'd be like, fuck off if someone's like mean to her. And then they wouldn't be in her life anymore. And I saw the value in that. I was like, yeah, she stands up for herself. And then for me, I feel like having that mentality of kind of like, why would I be around people that talk to me like that? She showed me that. But now as a mom, my kids are having interactions, right? And I'm trying to explain this to them. And just the other night, I was explaining to my daughter, like, do you see that your dad ever talks to me disrespectfully? Or I kind of was like showing her my friendships or whatever. And she was like, yeah, oh my gosh, he never talks down to you. And like, you have such great friendships and you and Brooke have so much fun. And I think it can really pay off when, and I know it has to come from within, but even just starting to mirror, like, if someone is constantly talking to me that way, it's because I'm allowing that in my space. And the second you can flip that internally of like, that, I'm not around those types of people, or I don't allow that banter, maybe it'll fizzle away. I don't know how long that takes to kind of weed out all of these assholes in your circle. But like, what have you seen with your clients?
I find that they go through a little bit of a grieving process. So almost always the first is anger. They're so angry at both other people who've treated them that way and at themselves for allowing it. And it doesn't matter how old they are. I've seen people in their 20s, 30s, 60s, all different age saying, I can't believe I've wasted so much time worrying about these other people. And so there's almost always this intense anger period. Then sometimes there will be some sadness, some grief of like, who am I if I'm not hanging out with my college sorority? Who am I if I'm not going out drinking all the time with my drinking friends, right? There's an identity shift of, if I let go of these relationships, what does that mean about who I am? And then as you eliminate, right, like one of the key factors in manifestation is clearing out the things that aren't helpful, that aren't getting you towards your goal. So the more you create that chasm, the more you have availability for new people to come in. And it's not dissimilar to just deciding, let's say, that you're not going to eat meat anymore, right? Like you go to a menu now and you look for the mac and cheese, you look for all of the things you can eat because that's on your radar. You're not worried about any of the meat anymore. It's exactly the same thing. It's just what we choose to focus on. It's what we tolerate or choose not to tolerate, and conversely, what we choose to focus on.
Oh, so good. So good. Okay, Amy, last question.
Okay.
If you could go back and tell younger Amy one thing, what age would you choose and what would you tell her?
I would, this may be controversial for some folks. I would go back probably to age 15 or 16. And I would say, all the shit you're worried about, don't worry about it because God doesn't exist.
Oh, that is a controversial one.
I would say in the iteration that you've been taught about God, there is no punitive deity that is demanding your praise or else they're going to send you to eternal damnation. That's not a thing. And I would say you are going to meet your soulmate when you're 18. Trust that. I would say your skin won't always look like this because I had horrible, horrible acne. Your skin won't always look like this. I would say trust your intuition because that is your every little inkling of like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't sound right. I don't feel good around that. Follow that, even if it's related to the faith you were raised in. Yes, you are queer and that's okay. There will be a time when you can be way more open about that than you can right now. And I would just say, I would say you're spot on, like all of those instincts, all of those intuitions, that is your divine compass. That is your internal God. So follow that. You already have everything you need.
How empowering. And whether you have this similar beliefs or not, I think it's really important to go back to that person, especially at 15, like when we're so vulnerable and trying to fit in and have acne and are so influenced by what our parents think and are saying has to be the truth. You know, I can just like see you in that household. That must have been so challenging, feeling the way that you felt and feeling it was wrong. And I can't even imagine, but I do think from hardly knowing you and listening to your work, that the way that you've experienced life and empower people to feel their instinct, hear their voice, cultivate these strong relationships, make more belonging for themselves, to themselves, and then outwardly, it's so beautiful. And you're so fun and quirky that I feel like you're just doing the right thing. I'm so happy that we were able to talk with you and learn from you. This has been such a powerful hour and 15 minutes. Which is way over our time, but you are just a gem. And I'm so happy that we know you and that our listeners have access to you.
Well, thank you so much. I know that for people, who don't know how it works, sometimes you pitch yourself to a podcast and you're basically just knocking on a door going like, hey, can I share my stuff with your people? And that's such a big ask. And I never take it lightly to be invited into somebody else's home and that you're like, sure, yeah, her. Yeah, she can talk to our people. And so that just means the world to me. So thank you for letting me scream into the mic for an hour and 15 minutes.
I love it.
Anytime. We're so honored to have you here, to know you. So grateful for you. And Amy, we leave our listeners with a piece of gold, a quote that speaks to you. Would you please leave our listeners with yours?
Sure. There's a great quote by Irma Kurtz that says, givers have to set limits because takers rarely do.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.
Damn.
Oh, what a perfect quote.
Wow, Amy. Jesus, that was so good. I mean, I don't believe in Jesus, but I do. And I feel like our Jesus lovers will like that until the very end.